Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 778 for the 3rd of September, 2023. Richard Saunders coming to you this week from Skeptoid headquarters here in Bend, Oregon. I arrived in Bend a few days ago to be greeted by Brian Dunning and an atmosphere full of smoke, thick smoke hurting my eyes. But it smells not terribly unpleasant. It's strange. It's a different smoke smell to the ones that I would remember from Australia. Luckily for everybody, the smoke has cleared somewhat in the following days. And the very day I arrived, that evening, I did a skeptical workshop, the Skeptical Box of Tricks, for Nerd Night here in Bend, Oregon, with my host Brian Dunning. A report about that night a bit later on in this week's episode of the Skeptic Zone. But kicking off today's show, you can count on Adrienne. This week, Adrienne chats to Kat McLeod from Edmonton in Canada about the strange practice of mouth taping. Well, hush my mouth. Can placing tape over your mouth, forcing you to breathe through your nose, improve your health and your sleep? Adrienne and Kat look at some of the claims and the reality of this bizarre medical trend. It's such an interesting interview, I had to listen to it 3 times. Also in today's episode, I chat to Brian Dunning about his thoughts and opinions about the latest UFO fad, phase, craze that we're living through at the moment. And also the updates on his movie, the UFO movie they don't want you to see because now it's available for viewing around the world. And finally, to wrap up today's show, we dive back into Trove. And Trove will look at the pseudoscience, the quackery of applied kinesiology. This is muscle testing. This is where the so-called practitioner will, I hesitate to use the word pretend because they sincerely think they're really doing something real, appear to diagnose bodily ills and all sorts of other things by pressing down on your arm, for example, and testing the strength of your arm, quackery from beginning to end. And in this week's show notes, you'll find some links to videos about applied kinesiology, including one video where the phrase, a quantum physics simulated frequency of something, is used. No, it's not a parody, it's a real video. Now, before we start, a message from the Australian Skeptics. Nominations for the 2023 Bent Spoon Award are now open. And the blurb says at skeptics.com.au, the spoon is awarded annually to the perpetrator of the most preposterous piece of paranormal or pseudoscientific piffle. Past winners of this most unwanted award have included the Australian Vaccination Network, the ABC, SBS, Wollongong University, RMIT, and Paleo Pete Evans, the only person to win it twice. Nominations for this year's award so far are Walkley Award winner Ross Coulthart for his ongoing espousing of UFO conspiracies, naturopath Barbara O'Neill for continuing to promote dangerous quack cures, SBS, and that's the broadcaster in Australia, again for promoting Uri Geller's claims of psychic powers and cutlery manipulation, and Senator Jared Rennick for his continued promotion of conspiracy theories, anti-vax, and misuse of science. The winner will be announced at the gala dinner at the 2023 Skepticon, the Australian Skeptics National Convention, held in Melbourne this year in December. Now, for more information, head to skeptics.com.au and you may wish to nominate somebody yourself. And a big shout out to my lovely friends in Melbourne. But now it's time for me to walk out of my guest cell here at Skeptoid headquarters, walk into the Skeptoid kitchen and have a Skeptoid pancake. Oh, yum. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. you can count on Adrienne. With Adrienne Hill.
Hello, everyone. This is Adrienne Hill from Skookum Studios. And today I'm joined by my friend Kat McLeod, all the way from rival city, Edmonton, Alberta, which is about 3 hours north of here. Welcome, Kat.
Thank you so much for having me, Adrienne. It's a pleasure to be here.
And today we're going to talk about something that I keep getting emails about for some reason. And it's something that I was unfamiliar with, and it is called, of all things, hostage tape. Is this company actually promoting kidnapping? And this idea was reinforced today when I got a weekend sale ad that said I could get $149 off of a year's supply of tape, an extra tape tin for free, plus, wait for it, an ultra-comfortable hostage blindfold.
Well, Adrienne, that sounds like an offer you can't refuse.
Yeah, it's a bit creepy with getting all these ads about this. I don't know what kind of person they think I am.
I'd never heard of hostage tape until you mentioned it to me, and I had quite a similar reaction. So I went down a rabbit hole and I discovered that hostage tape is for you to put over your mouth when you sleep to help avoid mouth breathing. And you do look like a hostage when you use it, hence the name, I suppose. As somebody who has a rare medical condition, which I do, I find this very alarming because I have got a condition called idiopathic subglottic stenosis, which means my trachea forms scar tissue until it almost closes shut. On average, sufferers around the world take about 7 years to get a proper diagnosis. Usually we are misdiagnosed with having asthma for many years until somebody puts a scope down our throat and discovers that, oh, wait, there's another issue here. Because it is very rare. In Canada, I think there's only 72 of us with this condition. However, subglottic stenosis is more common, and we will be seeing more of it because of COVID. Anytime you have long-term intubation, your trachea is prone to scarring, and that can lead to this stenosis. So if you didn't know you had this stenosis and you put tape over your mouth, you could actually die.
That's a very serious concern. And as you say, people don't necessarily know they have this condition.
Exactly.
Or many other conditions, as we're going to find out. So I discovered that hostage tape is just one of many companies selling a wide variety of mouth tape, and it has become quite a trend. So can you tell the listeners what mouth tape actually is, what it looks like, and how big of a trend this actually is?
Absolutely, because you dragged me into this rabbit hole with you. I have found that there are tapes like the hostage tape, which covers your entire mouth. There are X-style shapes, which makes you look like you have the letter X over your mouth, or simple runway strips that run from your septum down to your lower lip. You know, for those who want to be more subtle with their mouth taping, because it's a fashion statement somehow. Looking into this, I have gone on to YouTube. It's hilarious. There were 118 million views on TikTok related to this topic as of the end of August of 23. There are over 1,000 Instagram tags about mouth taping and mouth tape, and there are several accounts dedicated to it on Instagram, as well as several dedicated groups, some with thousands of members on Facebook.
And speaking of Instagram, even a really well-known pseudoscience queen has gone on there and has declared that, quote, mouth tape is the single best wellness tool I've found recently, end quote. And then added, quote, breathing through your nose at night apparently creates alkalinity in the body and promotes the best quality sleep, end quote. I'm guessing you know who that is, Kat.
I'm guessing that is Goopy Gwyneth.
It absolutely is Gwyneth Paltrow. surprisingly, we couldn't find evidence that she actually sells it. She just uses it.
So far.
Yes, so far. Good point. And this trend has also been featured in newspapers like the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the New York Post, and apparently on TV as well. What did you find, Kat?
I have found that in the last year, it has been featured on CNN, Good Morning America, and even Inside Edition. This new, quote, health, end quote, trend has been in the media an awful lot, but as I mentioned earlier, I hadn't heard of this before, and neither had you.
That's correct.
Apparently, it's not even all that new. In fact, it began in 1952 when Dr. Konstantin Buteyko created his method, which involves several breathing exercises in addition to mouth taping. The practice was introduced in the UK and Australia in the 1990s, and a clinic for the Buteyko method opened in Ireland in 2002.
So some of our Australian listeners may be totally aware of this.
They may be much more familiar than we are, because Canadians usually cover our mouths with scarves instead of tape.
So I came across the name Buteyko in my research as well. I found him in a 2009 Science-Based Medicine article that was titled Buteyko Breathing Technique, Nothing to Hyperventilate About. And in the article, it goes through a bunch of studies that have been done over the years, not a lot of them, that have tested whether or not it helps with asthma. And essentially it said, not really. The evidence was not very strong, which suggests that it's best not to tape your mouth shut if you have asthma. And you also found some information about studies, Kat.
Absolutely. Despite this practice going on for decades, there have only been very few studies with small sample sizes. One had 30 people in the test group, another only 36. And none of them have shown any definitive evidence that this practice is actually effective. Nasal breathing has been proven to be beneficial. However, the medical community is not promoting taping your mouth shut, aside from a few rogue dentists that we found online.
Yeah, and they were in Australia, Canada, the US, all over the place. These companies that sell mouth tape have a lot of claims. And can you go over what some of the claims you found were?
Sure. I found that taping your mouth shut can give you better sleep and better mornings. It can give you improved oral care so you don't wake up with a dry mouth, bad breath, and it reduces your risk of gum disease, crooked teeth, or teeth grinding. It's supposed to help you stop snoring, bolster your immunity.
Of course it does.
It filters allergens, reduces anxiety. I get anxious just thinking about having my mouth taped shut. And it improves your jawline and your double chin, lowers your blood pressure, but suffocating will do that to a person. And it is even supposed to help ED in gentlemen, if you know what I mean.
It's crazy, all the claims. And I'm always suspicious whenever they claim that it bolsters your immunity or improves your immunity. That's always a bit of a red flag as soon as you see that.
Agreed.
From that, we're going to actually look at what some of the risks and dangers actually are that they usually don't talk about on the websites. To start off, I'm going to talk about a New York Post article by Asia Grace, and it has a descriptive title, and it is called Mouth Taping is One of the Most Dangerous TikTok Trends. And she interviewed a sleep expert named James Wilson, and he stated that, quote, taping your mouth will make your health worse and will contribute to more serious issues like heart disease, COPD, and stroke, particularly if applied and you are a sleep apnea sufferer, end quote. I think that's a bit concerning.
Absolutely. And to my earlier point, if you don't know the cause of your nocturnal mouth breathing, taping your mouth shut could have life-threatening consequences. If you have undiagnosed or diagnosed sleep apnea, a deviated septum, or another health issue, it could worsen your sleep and you risk asphyxiation By covering your mouth with tape, it may cause more sleep disruption due to the inability of you to take a deep, full breath. Taping your mouth shut could also cause skin irritation. You may have an allergic reaction to the tape. It could be very painful to remove the tape, as I saw in a TikTok video, leaving some with questionable looking facial hair. You could also accidentally aspirate or ingest the tape, causing you to choke. If you buy hostage tape, you can read on the back of the packaging, which should actually be on the website, but I couldn't find it, at least not easily. But I'll read you what it says. It says, quote, "While hostage tape is generally safe, do not use hostage tape if you have trouble breathing through your nose. Do not use by itself without a CPAP if you are obese with a BMI over 35. Do not use if you have very low blood pressure. Do not use if you have severe heart or breathing problems, or if you have a cold, sinus, or ear infection. Do not use if you have severely chapped lips or non-intact skin immediately around the mouth," which I'm not quite sure what that means, but okay, "or after consuming alcohol or sedatives." End quote.
It sounds to me like most people shouldn't use it according to these warnings.
That was my takeaway as well.
And there are other ways of accomplishing what they claim, which is, having a dry mouth, breathing with your mouth open, etc., and some of the issues around it. I know my dentist has talked to me about mouth breathing because it can promote gingivitis and gum disease. So it is a good thing to try and practice not breathing through your mouth. But the experts have lots of alternatives that don't necessarily cost you a lot of money and also don't make you tape your mouth shut.
Absolutely. Some of these are so easy and free. You can stop mouth breathing by simply changing your sleep position. Stopping smoking and drinking alcohol is also very beneficial. You can practice good oral hygiene, which everyone appreciates. You can have your asthma and allergies treated. See a doctor to diagnose your snoring or sleep troubles. You can avoid food and or caffeine before bedtime. You can do breathing exercises like yoga breathing. I love doing yoga breathing. You can be active. And one of the easiest things to do, if none of the previous suggestions help, is you can get those nasal breathing strips, as they do have studies and have been proven to improve your nasal breathing without the risk of preparing yourself for a nocturnal abduction.
And lastly, I'm going to talk about something that's been in the media recently. And this person actually tapes her mouth during the day, so not at night. And the article appeared in the Washington Post, and it was written by Kaylin Soong. And it was called "A Pro Athlete Trained with Tape Over Her Mouth, and You Probably Shouldn't." And it is about the world #1 women's tennis player, Iga Swiatek, who practices tennis with mouth tape. And her goal is to improve performance by breathing only through her nose. The article goes on to say that studies are pretty inconclusive, or say this is actually detrimental because muscles don't get enough oxygen. Some researchers believe nasal-only breathing can improve athletic performance, but the science is quite unclear.
Yes, the only science I found supporting this is that it can be beneficial to help quickly dilate blood vessels, but it's not going to have many lasting long-term effects. In that article, Nicholas Rowan, an assistant professor of otolaryngology, which is an ENT for those unaware, he fears that people could aspirate the tape or have an allergic reaction to it. The article actually quotes him as saying, "You can actually have a hard time breathing when you're doing it in an unsupervised environment." Instead, he recommends that you be mindful of your breath during exercises, making a conscious effort to keep your mouth closed.
It makes a lot more sense than taping your mouth shut.
Absolutely it does. The reason why you start to mouth breathe when you're exercising or sleeping is because your body goes into survival mode. It's not getting enough oxygen, so it wants to compensate by sort of opening up the valves and letting more air in. And so if you're just shutting off your mouth by taping it shut, your body will start to react in survival mode, and it could cause high anxiety and panics.
Which is not a good thing.
I did see some research that said that exercising with mouth tape can actually be detrimental because your performance actually drops over time.
Which is not what a professional athlete would want.
Absolutely not.
And the article did stress that it's not a good idea for your average person to do this when you're exercising, ever. It's not a good idea. And I think it would be wise to advise anybody who thinks this might be a good idea to first check with your doctor before doing it, even if it's at bedtime and you're just sleeping. I think it's something that you shouldn't just do because Gwyneth says so, or because you get an email about hostage tape. Well, thank you so much, Kat. This has been a lot of fun. We've spent quite a bit of time together, giggling Canadian gals. And I just want to thank you for all the research you have done. You made my job very easy. And I hope we can do this again. So thanks so much, Kat.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been incredibly educational for me, at least, hopefully for the listeners as well.
Exactly. And I hope they've learned about something not to do. So, Kat, how can people find you if they want to get in touch?
Why on earth would anyone want to find me, Adrienne? I'm kind of like a cryptid. Looking for me is all of the fun.
Well, if you're a cryptid, that must mean all your photographs are blurry.
What photographs?
No photographs at all. Just a legend.
Just a legend. But spoiler alert, I'm not the New Zealand artist who shares my name. If you do want to reach out, you can find me at Kitty Corner Skeptic on TikTok and Instagram.
Awesome. Until next time, this is Adrienne Hill
from Skookum Studios in Calgary.
Okay, zebras,
hello.
orangutans. Oh,
Yes, sorry. Hi.
I'm not used to the animals talking. Who are you?
Yes, my name's Carrie Poppy. I co-host a podcast called Ona Ross and Carrie. This is my co-host Ross right here.
Okay.
We investigate spirituality, claims of the paranormal, and we were wondering if we could get on the Ark.
You did come 2 by 2. I
Thank
appreciate that.
you.
Though most of the things I'm letting on the Ark don't talk.
I'm going to be talking all up on this boat. Do you mind both?
I prefer Ark or
Okay,
barge.
I'm not listening, but if you let me on, then I will make my really good podcast on your boat.
Can you
barge.
at least help clean up all the poop?
I guess I don't see why not.
Well, I'll check out the podcast. Where do I find it?
It's on MaximumFun.org.
On Tuesday, the 29th of August, it was my great pleasure to present the Skeptical Box of Tricks at Nerd Night in Bend, Oregon. And this is put on through the Skeptoid Media with Brian Dunning. Every month they have a skeptical trivia or something else interesting for the locals. And the other night it was me. The Skeptical Box of Tricks is a workshop including water divining, spoon bending, power balance bands, and making some origami. As the crowd turned up to the Poorhouse Brewery for the night, everybody received a 10-sided die for a souvenir, a keepsake. I was introduced by my friend Brian Dunning.
So everyone, please enjoy all the food and drink you can to thank them for letting us have this space. There is water over here. Come get water anytime. Help yourself. Tonight, last month we did science trivia. Tonight we're doing something a little bit different. This is my good friend Richard Saunders from Australia. So if he throws a lot of crikeys and throwing shrimp on the barbie, you can forgive him for that. You can call him the Thunder from Down Under. He's going to give us a little bit of a show tonight. I will let him introduce himself about that, but I've known him for many, many years. So tonight he's going to do all kinds of amazing things, and I'm just going to shut up and let him dig in and do his thing. So Everyone please welcome Richard Saunders.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian Dunning from Skeptoid.com. Well, thank you very much for coming along here. This is the second time I'm giving this workshop. It's called the Skeptical Box of Tricks. And this is, this is my attempt to pass on to you some of the more interesting aspects I've discovered in 25 years of investigating psychic and paranormal powers and things. That's a little bit about me. Brian mentioned a few things. You can see I've not been too lazy in my skeptical activities. Is that better? There we go. I've had a wonderful time. I was, for a long time, part of the James Randi Educational Foundation's $1 Million Challenge. And in Las Vegas, we'd test people on stage for their psychic ability for $1 million. I've got a weekly show called the Skeptic Zone podcast. It's been going for 15 years, I think 15 or 16 years. I'm trying to catch up with Brian Dunning's Skeptoid. What episode number are you up to?
900. Episode 900 airs next week.
I'm only up to 777. So
Just a newbie.
So that's an awful lot of fun. And then tonight I hope to do a few recordings for the next episode of the show. But tonight I'm going to show you some of the things that I've learned over this time, which are the fun, wacky, interesting, crazy things. And at the end we'll all make some origami. As you can see around, I've placed some. Everybody should have a piece. If you haven't, don't worry, you will. At the end of this table over here, there's a lineup of origami. You may go over and help yourself to a piece of origami if you don't have one, or if you want an extra piece, that would be wonderful. As the evening progressed, we got to the stage where I presented the body tricks, the body balance tricks, the applied kinesiology tricks used by Power Balance Wristband, and many other such devices. I found the exact factory in China where the real ones were made, and we had these made for about 10 cents. They were being sold in Australia, I can tell you. I'm not sure what they were sold for here. In Australia, they were being sold for $60 each. Okay? And this is largely how they convinced people that they work. I need a volunteer, Leonard. We've never met before, have we, sir? They would do this in sporting fairs, trade fairs. They'd have a booth with their branding and stuff on it. And they'd say to people, the people would come along and say, "Hello, sir. We've never met before, have we?" No, I don't think so. No. How would you like to increase your balance and your strength and your flexibility? Yes, you would. Okay. These are the tests they would do. And if you look at the packet there, they're actually trying to show some of these tests. First, we're going to test your balance. All right. So if you stand over there just a wee bit, that's the way. And a bit forward, a bit more. Great. So, we're going to test this. We've never met before, have we? No, we haven't. Not since, yeah. Yeah, okay. So, what I want you to do is hold up your arms like that. That's right. But lift this leg off the ground and just balance on one leg. I'm going to test your balance. Are you ready? I'm going to test your balance. Okay, you're very good. You fell off straight away. Your balance is terrible. For only $10, we're going to try this amazing band. So if you hold that band, you can feel the power. Ooh. It's the embedded frequencies. The embedded frequencies in the hologram. All right. So once again, arms out, lift this leg and balance for me. Oh! That $20 band has just increased your balance. Oh! Really well. How about that? Let's test your strength. After the demonstration, I took a slightly more serious look at these body tricks and how they've been used in the past to sell very dangerous quackery and ideas. Like the water device. It's fascinating. There's me, many years ago, at a mind-body spirit or mind-body wallet festival, as we call them. that lady was doing the test on me because she was selling a disc made out of volcanic ash that improved your strength and all the same sort of claims. But the other claim was if you put this disc under a jug of water, it would turn the water into sunblock. Right? She really believed it because she was told this ridiculous science by the marketing department. And normally I bite my tongue. And this is one of the few times I just said to her, listen, you cannot make these claims. You cannot tell people in Australia with one of the highest rates of skin cancer in the world that you can use water as sunblock. Sometimes what we do is deadly serious. I kid you not. Sometimes you just really shake your head.
Before long, we got to the really fun part of the night, which is teaching how to bend spoons, just like those famous psychics did way back in the 1970s.
So the other one, the other variation, which is even a better optical illusion, is you get the same spoon and you hold it there, right? Just bear in mind this one. It really looks like it's rubber, okay? This one you can have a similar effect. You hold it here, and you know the routine is you say, I'm putting my power up here, I'm rubbing the metal up here, I'm going to wiggle the bottom and look, it's starting to get rubbery. And people will see that? See how it's starting to look like it's getting rubber? And you say, you know, my psychic power is making the metal weak and it's bending. And you can really convince people. Last time I did that, everybody applauded. I better quit now. Looks like I'm really psychic after all.
Finally, the evening wrapped up with everybody making a classic piece of origami under my instruction. A big thank you to Brian Dunning, Skeptoid Media, and everybody who showed up at the Nerd Night in Bend, Oregon. And thank you very much for your kind compliments and messages after the talk. If you're in the Bend, Oregon area, I will link to the appropriate page in the show notes so you too can attend Nerd Night.
Hejsan alla svenskar som lyssnar på The Skeptic Zone podcast. Det här är Pontus Böckman från The ESP, The European Skeptics Podcast. När ni har lyssnat klart på alla inslag och intervjuer här på The Skeptic Zone så kanske ni har lust att kolla vad som händer på The ESP. Ni hittar oss på theesp.eu där man finner skeptiska nyheter och inslag ur ett europeiskt perspektiv. Vi ses där!
Today is the 1st of September 2023, and I'm delighted to say that the UFO movie They Don't Want You to See is finally out. It's been out for a little while now, hasn't it, Brian Dunning?
It's been out for, about, I think, a few weeks.
A few weeks.
Yeah.
Okay. And people can see the latest information on that and where to see it on streaming services at the website, right?
Yeah, the website, theufo.movie. Just type that in your browser, theufo.movie, and right there on the homepage will be all of the current streaming options, and you can watch trailers in there and all that fun stuff.
So it's an interesting process being an independent filmmaker. You've had some obstacles along the way. How difficult it is if we got listeners out there who think they can make a documentary and just put it out there. What's the some of the obstacles?
Yeah, the industry has been changing a lot. It's been really dynamic for several years. at least several years, especially from the perspective of independence. The major studios are trying to make sure they don't lose control. They want to make sure that little independents can't come up and take over the industry with a super successful movie. And they've got a lot of levers that they can pull to make those things happen. It's almost impossible to get your movie into theaters. It's almost impossible to get your movie onto the major streaming services as like an original, like a Netflix original movie. Those aren't actually produced by Netflix. They're produced by documentarians like myself who have a relationship with a distributor large enough to make a deal like that with Netflix. So we end up coming in kind of as on the lower tier. Some people call it a grassroots distribution, which means that whether your movie is ever going to be recommended to anyone or ever visible to someone unless they search for it by name, that all kind of depends on the algorithms now. So, and there's all sorts of different payout tiers as well. People like myself will be down on the very, very bottom payment tiers, and it's almost impossible to recoup the budget that you spent. Yeah. These are all the things that the industry tries to do to sort of. I'm not trying to sound like a conspiracy theorist. I was just about to say. I really am not. I mean, these are actual just business things that you have to contend with. If I wanted to, I could go get a distribution deal. I would have had to do it much earlier in the process. It would have cost a lot more money. You have to have a lot of things in place, like all of these policies, insurance policies and things that are prohibitively expensive for independents.
And what about quality standards? When you're making your movie, obviously you're aiming for a good quality. But I must admit, I was looking at Tubi, T-U-B-I, Tubi streaming service earlier today, and I typed in UFO because I understand that your movie will be appearing on Tubi, and there are many movies that came back, but honestly, a lot of them are very poor quality.
Yeah, they talk about the democratization of content now. Anyone with an iPhone can make a feature film.
Yeah.
And to some degree that's true, but also creativity and movie-making skill and ability play a large role. And so people who make crap YouTube conspiracy documentaries, they have the same ability to upload their movies to the Amazon Prime Direct portal, for example, and get their movie on Amazon Prime. They have the same ability to do that as I do. And so you are competing with really low-quality crap. Yeah. So, you still do the best you can do. What I can do well, I'll often do myself. What I can't do well, I'll hire people who are the best I can afford. And you try to make a film that truly does meet the highest standards of it's not a special effects film or anything like that, so I'm not competing with Iron Man 5, but in terms of the writing and the editing and the video quality and the lighting and the color and the sound and the audio and the music, the things that you can control, that you still have to control, I still try to do as good a job as possible.
Well, I think that's a very good policy. I hope that I have that same philosophy in my projects. Of course, you try to do the best you can. But let's look at another angle. Since you started working on this in the last 4 or 5 weeks, of course, we've had this amazing spectacle of these congressional hearings, right?
Yeah.
Now, is this a plus or a minus for you, for the movie?
Oh, so, people ask me that question, hey, these congressional hearings, I'm sure you got to go back and recut your movie to incorporate. Well, no. Something like that always is happening. And there was certainly nothing interesting about these hearings, despite what you might be hearing. And it doesn't impact the content of this film at all. If you wait for the perfect time to make your film, when nothing is going to happen to make your film irrelevant, then your film will never get made. So I was not concerned about that. And like I say, the film is not really about that. That's just an embarrassment. That's Congress's problem. It's not my problem.
Yeah.
This movie, the UFO movie, they don't want you to see, I see it as an opportunity to teach astronomy and astrophysics using the public interest in UFOs as a springboard. And so the fact that there's some new UFO story in the news, that really is not relevant to the content of the film. So no, Not worried about that at all.
I'm also fascinated by the fact, I think I was talking to you about this before, that people are of the opinion that simply because somebody sits down and under oath says something, therefore it must be true. You know, these guys, well, they said it under oath and under threat of jail time, so how can you deny that, Mr. Skeptic, you know?
Yeah, I often will go on Twitter and follow the UFO Twitter hashtag, or excuse me, X.
X.
Yeah. And follow the UFO Twitter hashtag, which is still what it is, and just see what kind of arguments people are making and see what people are talking about. My reason for doing that is to try and better understand their mindset and see how I can better craft a message that these people will be receptive to. The people who tend to reject all the science-based explanations in favor of their preferred explanation, which is that aliens actively visit the Earth.
Yeah.
What are they talking about? What do they consider persuasive? And how can I reach them? And yeah, that the thing that, he said those things under oath. Therefore, they are factually, literally true. And it would be a crime for him to be lying.
Yeah.
So, people are still wrong about things. Yeah. And they're not, and people can be wrong under oath. It's like, that's never happened before.
That's never happened. And Mick West has been just pointing out lately on his YouTube channels, pilots mistaking Starlink for genuine, unknown or inexplicable things. And Mick West just deconstructs where they were and says, lo and behold, there was a Starlink train of satellites that night.
Yeah, and Mick has a big segment in my film as well. And we talked to an air traffic controller, Jason Bush, and one of the things he points out is the kinds of mistakes that pilots make, including military pilots who will sometimes land at the wrong airport. You'd think that that's a pretty darn huge mistake. Oh, but they're a military pilot. Military pilots are incapable of error, right?
Yep.
Well, no, they're not. They're humans like everyone else. I've got a super experienced air traffic flight instructor in the film who's also an NTSB investigator, and he talks about how pilots are not sky gods. They're just people flying airplanes.
But you would hear this too. I hear it all the time. Trained observers, right?
Yeah, trained observer. And we speak to all these same people about that. What exactly does trained observer mean for a military pilot? And none of the people I spoke to said that's not part of any training I'm aware of. What does that even mean? It's just something that people started saying, and now they go with pilots are trained observers. Therefore, anything that a pilot thinks he saw is a factual, literal account of what happened, when in fact there's not a word of truth in that. Pilots are as able to be wrong about things as you and I are. And you can say, well, pilots are more experienced at things that pilots encounter, things that you run into in the sky. And yes, that's true. So everyone that I spoke to in the film, these are the questions that we asked. What are pilots looking out for? They're trying not to hit things. You care 99% about not hitting it, whatever it is. You care 1% about what it might possibly be. That's not part of the equation. Am I going to hit it? No? Fine, great. Moving on. Paying attention to other more important things now.
The UFO.movie, that's the URL to visit. You can see where you can see it in your part of the world. It's available now for everybody.
Right now it's available worldwide on Vimeo. And it's coming out soon on... the only ones I know for sure it's coming out soon on are Amazon Prime. I think that's just going to be US and UK. Okay. And then Tubi TV. I'm not sure what countries that's going to be in, but that's going to be free with ads.
Certainly available in Australia, Tubi, yeah.
Yeah, and Vimeo is worldwide, so that's...
All right. So the word is, folks, don't wait, because they don't want you to see it. You should see it, right? What's the follow-up? The UFO movie they want you to see. That's your follow-up, right?
Now that it's released, I do want you to see it, so...
What's in the pipeline? Anything, or you just want to take a break from filmmaking for a while?
Oh, no, we're not going to take a break, but it's going to be probably sometime into next year before we're able to start the next film. We're very busy with a lot of operational stuff here at Skeptoid this year. We're spread pretty thin. We've added a lot of new people and a lot to catch up with.
And just finally, of course, in a month, is it a month or 2 months, you're showing the movie at SciCon.
That's right, at SciCon in Las Vegas, last week of October, I think, somewhere about then. If you haven't seen it yet and you're going to be at SciCon, that's your chance. You just have to RSVP on the website. I think that's it. Actually, I need to put up a link for that somewhere.
You should. But if you're going to SciCon, take the time out, check it out, watch the movie, and you can ask Brian. And you can ask Brian Dunning your tricky questions on the night. Brian, thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. Always good to be here. Hey everyone, this is Brian Dunning from the Skeptoid podcast. I have just completed my new feature documentary film about the real science behind the UFO phenomenon, tantalizingly entitled The UFO Movie They Don't Want You to See. Well, here's your chance to spite them and to see it anyway. If you're going to be at SciCon 2023 in Las Vegas this October, we're having a free screening. All you need to do is RSVP, and you can do that at skeptoid.com/events. The UFO Movie at SciCon 2023, skeptoid.com/events.
It's time once again to go back to those Trove archives at trove.nla.gov.au. Of course, the wonderful resource from the National Library of Australia, funded by the federal government in Australia for digitised newspapers, magazines, and all sorts of historical documents. It's searchable, so all you have to do is go along and type in your criteria and then trawl through the Trove. Now, as you heard earlier in the show, for my skeptical box of tricks, one of the demonstrations I was doing were the power balance band, wristband tricks of some 10 years ago. These tricks are still going on. The muscle testing, which is in the category called applied kinesiology. What is applied kinesiology? Well, let's look to see what James Randi had to say about applied kinesiology in the Encyclopedia of Claims, Frauds, and Hoaxes of the Occult and Supernatural. Applied kinesiology. This is a claimed diagnostic technique, also known simply as AK. It consists of having the subject stand with a test subject in one hand, while the other arm is stretched straight out from the side of the body. The operator places their palm upon the outstretched arm and presses down with a certain force, attempting to depress the arm and judging the degree of force required to accomplish this effect. They then compare it to the amount of force needed to compress the arm when the test subject is not being held by the subject in the other hand, or when a bad substance is held. It is claimed that when a harmful substance is being held, the arm depresses easily. When a beneficial or harmless substance is present, the force needed is much greater, since the body is now not weakened by the vibrations of the negative substance. The effect observed is entirely due to the expectations of the operator, and this can clearly be shown by appropriate blind testing procedures in which the operator is kept ignorant of the expected results. As evidence that the AK idea is pure sympathetic magic, it is enough to know that promoters claim that while refined sugar can be clearly shown in a very dramatic manner to be a bad substance by this method, when actual sugar is placed in the hand, the same strength of effect is also brought about by simply having the subject hold a scrap of paper with the word sugar, or the chemical formula C12H22O11, sucrose, written on it in place of the actual substance. Believers in AK have no problem rationalizing the absurdity of such a claim. In the United States, in response to our increasing demand for nonsense, expensive courses are now being offered to doctors and dentists in which AK is taught to them as a diagnostic tool, and many otherwise sensible medical professionals have taken these courses and have accepted the effect as genuine. AK, applied kinesiology, has been tested thoroughly and has always been found to be useless. Now, just going through YouTube, if you type in applied kinesiology, you will see the most astonishing examples of self-delusion. Homeopaths, chiropractors, and so on, natural healers using this technique to diagnose people's problems. And it's almost a case of Poe's law. When you see some of these things, you think, are they just sending everybody up? Is this for real? And of course it is for real. These people genuinely believe it. One of the most astonishing examples of this is a video with a young mother and presumably the mother's toddler on her lap, while the applied kinesiology practitioner, in this case a chiropractor, is testing ailments in the toddler by pressing down on the mother's arm. Yep, no matter how absurd the claim, someone will believe it. Once you learn the tricks of applied kinesiology or muscle testing, you can then do unscrupulous things like pretend that power balance wristbands and things like that have an effect on the body. And indeed, over 10 years ago, I made a video, which I'll link to in the show notes, called Applied Kinesiology, How It's Done, which demonstrates exactly how these body tricks are performed. And over the years of the Mystery Investigators show in schools, some 20 years, I've demonstrated this to thousands of students with the hope that if they ever see it in the future, they will be able to spot the fraud straight away. But we must be careful with the use of the word fraud. Some of these people who are performing this applied kinesiology, well, many of them, sincerely believe it works. Now, it's not just pushing down on the arm that these people use to test bodily conditions. There's also a method where you link your fingers. In other words, you make little links between your thumb and first finger on both hands and join them together like a chain. And depending on how strongly you need to pull your hands apart to break the chain, you can diagnose things or ask the universe questions and so on. Now, before we get into the Trove segment about applied kinesiology, the final thought, I guess, at the moment would be, well, what's the harm? The harm is people go along and have this fake diagnosis or treatment or whatever, and the possibility, which does happen, is that they are then misdiagnosed and vitally important conditions like possible cancer are not detected until it's too late. So we do find some references to applied kinesiology in the pages of Australian newspapers. Let's have a look at the Riverina Herald, Echuca, Victoria, dated the 27th of May, 1998. Carol helps balance the body, mind, and spirit. Carol West offers clients alternative healing methods that provide a balance of body, mind, and spirit. As a primary school teacher, Carol spent many years searching for solutions to help young students with learning and/or behavior problems. When she contracted Ross River virus in 1984, her quest expanded to include healing to release her from constant aching. Having studied and qualified in a variety of alternative healing modalities, Carol now combines the techniques she has learned to assist clients to find the solutions to their problems. This does read like an advertorial, doesn't it? These include educational kinesiology, which is used for numerous reasons, including stress management, children with learning problems, ill health, and poor coordination. remedial massage, pulsing for peace, which involves deep body-mind healing through a gentle rocking motion. Maybe a rocking chair is all that you need. And Sitchim, which may be likened to a deep meditative and reflective state. Carol is studying homeopathy, and she offers a number of classes, including relaxation, self-help, healing, and massage. Carol is in Echuca every Wednesday and can be contacted on 5482-5076 or in her Rochester clinic on 5484-1514. No doubt those numbers are now not being used. She also visits Rushworth on the 4th Friday of the month. And from the same newspaper on the 4th of June 1999, therapists invited to take steps to help. Massage therapists with a little time on their hands are invited to join the team at STEPS, STEPS, the Campaspe Murray Heads on Health Centre. Centre staff would love to hear from therapists able to donate a few hours a month to work with people who can't normally afford their services. Massage is just one of the free services offered by STEPS, which operates in the lower hall of St. Andrew's, the Echuca Moama Uniting Church in Pakenham Street. Other services available include chiropractic, Bowen massage, and I think we'll discuss Bowen in a future Trove, kinesiology, Reiki, and hair cutting. Okay. STEPS is open each Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday from 11 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. The group recently obtained tax exemption status and public benevolent status, which means any donations over $2 can be claimed as a tax deduction. Anyone interested in becoming a STEPS volunteer is asked to phone 5480-2357 or 5482-5429. And I guess the message here is we know, of course, that many good-hearted people are involved in the alternative medicine world. Now from the Canberra Times on Monday, the 15th of January 1990. And this piece is more or less a general piece on quack treatments, but it does mention kinesiology. Specialists attack quack treatments. Melbourne. Australia's allergy specialists have hit out at unorthodox methods they say are being used by untrained or semi-trained practitioners to treat allergy sufferers. And I'll just break here to say one of the main times I've seen kinesiology, applied kinesiology in action would be at Mind Body Wallet fairs, Mind Body Spirit, at naturopath stalls or booths where they have people sit down and they do muscle testing on them, but they'll give the so-called patient / victim / subject a vial of homeopathic, whatever. Then they'll push down on their arms until they say, yes, this is causing this reaction or this gives you strength or whatever. Again, pure self-deluded quackery. We read on. Many of the methods being promoted are unscientific, a waste of money and could be dangerous, they say. Some doctors, as well as non-medical practitioners, are using the methods, some of which have been described as, quote, plain quackery, end quote. The warning from the Australian College of Allergy is published in the latest issue of the Medical Journal of Australia. A signed letter by 5 members of the college's Scientific and Therapeutic Subcommittee said a proliferation of unorthodox methods were being used to treat allergies. Not only did the uncontrolled use of, quote, such unproved practices, end quote, use up limited resources, but it could also stand in the way of effective treatment of common medical disorders. They hit out at bogus allergic syndromes that had no scientific basis. One such was a supposed group of symptoms called, quote, Candida hypersensitivity syndrome, end quote, said to be caused by multiplication of the fungus Candida through the body. Supposed symptoms included fatigue, lethargy, depression, inability to concentrate, hyperactivity, skin problems, constipation, diarrhea, gas and bloating, and symptoms of respiratory tract, urinary tract, and reproductive organs. Sounds terrible. Treatment being offered included restrictive diets, natural supplements, usually in large doses, and the use of antifungal agents, again in very large doses. Yet the description of the syndrome was so broad as to render it meaningless, and the concept was unproven, the college spokesman said. Elements of the proposed treatment program potentially are dangerous, particularly the long-term use of major antifungal agents by mouth and the extensive restriction of dietary carbohydrates. They also criticized what they said was a growing trend towards, quote, clinical ecology, end quote, the practice of blaming a whole range of symptoms on exposure to numerous common substances in the environment. Diagnosis involved multiple tests, treatment usually requiring major changes in the home environment, and lifestyle with highly restrictive diets. At times, the patient is hospitalized in a comprehensive environment control unit in a presumably chemical-free environment. The allergist said that while some techniques used may be useful for some patients, the diagnostic and therapeutic principles underlying the idea of clinical ecology showed it was unproven and experimental. Individuals who are being treated in this manner should be informed fully of its experimental nature. Two other unproved methods used in Australia were the Vega test method and applied kinesiology. The Vega machine purported to measure the, quote, bioelectrical, end quote, energy in the body by applying a probe on acupuncture points. Proponents of applied kinesiology claim that the application of allergenic substances against the body caused a decrease in the power of certain muscles. There is no specific evidence that either of these techniques can diagnose disease, the college executives said. The letter was signed by Dr. Connie Catellus of Westmead, Sydney, Dr. Kwok Yang of Sydney, Dr. John Viner of Kew, Melbourne, Dr. Robert Heddle of East Adelaide, and Dr. Martin Stuckey of Queen Elizabeth II Medical Centre, Perth. College President Dr. Peter Hill said yesterday that some of the methods used, such as the Vega test and applied kinesiology, were, quote, plain quackery, end quote. Dr. Hill said that as well as amateur or non-medically trained practitioners, some doctors had, quote, embraced these methods, end quote. Australia desperately needed a chair of allergy in a university medical school, he said. And that last segment reminds us all that a lot of these people who offer these services simply are not trained in medicine. Applied kinesiology, it's worth having a look on YouTube. So what I think I'll do is I will add a couple of YouTube videos about applied kinesiology so you can see this in action for yourself. Applied kinesiology, one of the most fascinating examples of self-delusion in alternative medicine. But don't forget, you can find out about all sorts of self-delusion and alternative medicine and all sorts of other things when you visit Trove at trove.nla.gov.au, because when you go there, you never know what you might find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Thank you to Brian and Lisa Dunning for hosting me here in Oregon at Skeptoid headquarters. It's an amazing place to be. It really is. Yesterday, for example, Brian Dunning and I conducted that interview you heard. In between times, we're doing research ourselves, which included watching some of William Shatner's paranormal documentaries from the 1970s. Thank you, Bill Shatner. You came through once again. Coming up on next week's show, the Trove segment will look at health myths. Try saying that 3 times quickly. Health myths. Thank you to those people who continue to support the Skeptic Zone at skepticzone.tv via Patreon or PayPal. But for this week, from beautiful and not too smoky today, Bend, Oregon, this is Richard Saunders signing off.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for episodes and show notes with links going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone on Facebook, X, TikTok and YouTube by clicking the links at our homepage, together with links to support the show financially via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are not necessarily those of the Skeptic Zone podcast or any other skeptical organisation.
The tapping, is it tapping solution app community instead of taping?
Yeah, they misspelled it. Because spelling, I guess, goes down the tubes when you're busy taping your mouth shut.
It would seem so.
The outtakes of this are going to be outrageous.
They're so good.
Rich is going to be okay. Y'all are doing your own podcast.
Too much giggling.
Those goofy Canuck girls.
Yeah, the Skeptic Zone giggling has just grown exponentially. Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness. Total hosers, eh?